Every election day, voters have the opportunity to reinvent America. The choices they make shape their households, communities, and even global affairs. It's a tremendous responsibility that was won by the sacrifices of colonial revolutionaries, suffragettes, and civil rights activists. But that fight continues to this day. In a healthy democracy, everyone who is eligible to vote should be allowed to do so. Any obstacles, legal or illegal, that prevent voters from exercising that constitutional right is a form of voter suppression. And in the United States, voter suppression has disproportionately impacted minority and disadvantaged communities. While the days of poll taxes, literacy tests, and having to answer questions like how many bubbles are in a bar of soap are over, Americans today face modern tactics that have the same effect of those white supremacist Jim Crow era practices of the past. Elections in the U.S. are administered at the state and county levels. So our elections are a patchwork of rules and regulations that vary depending on where you live. The United States is, however, one of the few democratic countries that requires most of its citizens to opt in to vote, and the result is predictable. Some states have online voter registration. Others allow voters to register by mail. Yet in 2010, at least 51 million voting-age Americans were not registered to vote at all. Of that number, 37% were Black and 48% were Hispanic. Erecting hurdles, like requiring voters to prove their citizenship, dictating when a voter can register, and imposing penalties on those organizing voter registration drives, hamper civic participation in already marginalized communities. Registering to vote for an election does not necessarily mean you are registered to vote for every election. In fact, state election officials are responsible for periodically updating their state's voter registration lists for things like moving to a new address, name changes, and removing the deceased. Keeping these records up to date is a tall order, leading to 1 in every 8 voter registration records being inaccurate. In some states, these discrepancies have been used to purge minority voters, particularly in former Confederate states with a history of racial discrimination. According to the Brennan Center, approximately 16 million voters were purged between the 2014 midterm election and the 2016 general election, up to 17% of them removed without justification. So let's say you figured out how to register to vote and managed to remain on the list of eligible voters without getting purged. Depending on your state, you may still have to present additional identification when you arrive at the polling station on Election Day. In the U.S., more than 21 million citizens have no photo identification. It may be too costly for some, ranging from $75 to $175, while traveling to a government agency to get an ID may be a hardship for others. Nevertheless, 36 states have instituted voter ID laws, which have resulted in an estimated 2 or 3% reduction in voter turnout. In some states, we're talking about tens of thousands of votes, which could be decisive in any given race, from dog catcher to President of the United States. In the 2016 U.S. presidential election, nearly 100 million eligible voters stayed home. Let me repeat, 100 million voters didn't vote. American democracy at the moment is stifled by a mix of voter suppression and voter apathy. There are no quick fixes for the latter, but here are 3 steps that can be taken to help defeat these forms of voter suppression. The first thing the U.S. can do is to create a nationwide system of automatic voter registration. This approach would use interactions we already have with state agencies like the Department of Motor Vehicles to sign people up to vote unless they ask to opt out. 15 states have taken this approach, including populous ones like California and smaller states like Oregon. In the months following the introduction of Oregon's automatic voter registration, there was a 375% increase in new registered voters. If others followed, experts estimate that this solution would add more than 50 million citizens to the voter rolls across the country. Second, the U.S. can expand the number of states who adopt an existing platform, like the Electronic Registration Information Center, also known as ERIC, to maintain the accuracy of its voter list in each state. ERIC cross-references voter registration information with other data collected by agencies like the DMV, Social Security Administration, and the U.S. Postal Service to update voter rolls. This reduces the overall number of errors and removes the justification to conduct wholesale voter purges. 30 states and the District of Columbia have already joined ERIC, and residents of the remaining 20 should encourage their states to follow suit. The third step tries to address voter ID laws. This is a tricky one, since any solution involves legal and legislative processes that rarely come quickly or follow a straight line. It will take pressure and persistence over time to change these laws, but the public has an important role to play. If you live in a state that has strict voter ID requirements, that is a result of state legislators passing laws that demand it. Electing legislators who understand the disproportionate burden voter ID requirements place on minority, rural, and poor voters without actually enhancing the security of our elections is a great place to start. It's worth noting that there have been only 31 cases of voter impersonation, the only thing a voter ID would prevent, since 2000, out of more than 1 billion votes cast. Electing pro-voter representatives combined with supporting nonprofit organizations who have taken legal action to overturn these suppression tactics will provide much-needed momentum to this movement. This issue is more than just checking a box on a slip of paper. It is about what kind of country the United States wants to be. The late civil rights icon, Congressman John Lewis, in one of his final speeches, summed it up best. In a democracy, the right to vote is the most powerful, nonviolent tool we have. Many people marched and protested for the right to vote. Some gave their blood, and others lost their lives. In my heart of hearts, I believe we should make it simple and convenient for all of our citizens to be part of the democratic process. It should not matter if you're black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. We can do better, and we must do better. We have a moral obligation, a mission, and a mandate to empower all of the American people, not just a select few. We must do what is right, what is fair, and what is just.